Hey everybody, what's up? I want to do a recap of 2021, not the COVID stuff, but fishing lure wise, right? If you've been hanging around the channel for a while, you know at the beginning of 2021, I said this.
I've decided that in 2021, I am only gonna fish with lures that I make myself. None of this store-bought stuff.
So I want to recap from that point to today in early 2022, what I learned. And the first thing I learned is designing soft plastic lures and injection molds is really hard. So that might seem obvious to everybody in here, but I really didn't have an appreciation for all the kind of complications you'll get into. You want to make a simple paddle tail, right? Well, how big is the body? How narrow is the tail section? How big can you make the actual tail and still keep it injectable with not gathering any air pockets in? I have totally newfound respect for even the simple paddle tail and how you design it. I've learned a lot on soft plastic lure design, specifically around 3D printed injection molds. And what I have now at the beginning of 2022 is a process and a system that is 100% repeatable pretty much if I want to make an injection mold for a soft plastic. I know where the problem areas are going to be, and I have workarounds and solutions. That's pretty sick. The video on my whole soft plastic injection mold, I'll put a link to it down in the description. It's pretty awesome and it works great. The second thing I learned is that hard lures are hard. That's profound. But you end up with like a whole different level of complications when you're talking about, making a crankbait, making a top water. You have all these different weighting considerations, and I probably approached it the hardest way possible, right? I wanted to avoid the kind of traditional method of making hard lures where you kind of make two separate halves, you put the weights in there and you glue them together. I wanted to do it all internally because I'm using a 3D printer, and that is kind of what I'm here for, to move the art of lure making forward. And so that added a whole nother level of complication and multiple revisions. And I only really got one lure out of it, my wake bait, which is great, totally crushes. But now it's time to move on to like other lures, and the complications just keep multiplying. And the third thing I really learned was keep it simple. At least keep it simple for as long as you possibly can. I would often get into a bait design and rapidly try to add all these bells and whistles, all these details to the lure. And I hadn't even really proved the overall design, the body shape, the tail, the lip on a crankbait would even function. So I was wasting a tremendous amount of time dealing with all these little details and ultimately had to scrap them all when the bait just didn't perform. So keeping it simple, design the basic shape, print it out if you're doing a hard lure, make a mold if you're doing a soft plastic, inject it and see if it actually performs like you think it's gonna perform before you go into all of those details. That would have saved me probably 3 months of time. The other thing I learned was I never really had the right bait for whatever I was fishing for, right? You get very used to being able to stop at the tackle store and buy whatever bait people are saying are biting these days, right? Like if it was a paddle tail bite going on, well, you just stop at the store and buy some paddle tails. If it's a shrimp bite, you buy some shrimp. If it's, whatever, topwater bites on fire, you go get yourself yet another spook. Since I was designing everything from scratch, like I kept bouncing back and forth like, ooh, it's shrimp time. Like, let's try to design a shrimp. Can't design a shrimp. Oh, by the time I get something that even remotely works, now it's like paddle tails, 4-inch paddle tails. Well, now I gotta go try to make one of those. And it was taking me so long because I knew so little that by the time I got there, like that bite had already passed. And so that was rough. And then I also rarely had the right color. So I'm not a huge proponent of, all these subtle colors making a difference, but just the simple things like a white one versus a dark one. Like, that tripped me up multiple times. I'd be out fishing, my buddies would be slaying them on a white paddle tail, and I'd be stuck with dark color paddle tails, and they weren't biting. That sucked. Then once I even had the right baits, I rarely had enough, right? I was in this prototype mode so much that I was printing out single cavity molds more often than not. And that really caused me to bring out maybe 1 or 2 baits at a time. So when I did have a successful bait with me, at least when I'm fishing for redfish, right? They were crushing it on one fish, and I had 2 of them. So 2 fish and I don't have that bait anymore. So if you look at this paddle tail right here, man, this bait has been killing it for me lately. So even though I was using a relatively tough plastic, this is Dead on Plastic Craw Tube Blend, one redfish bite was just destroying it. So then probably in like late November, I really kind of hit a stride, like everything started coming together. Now I'm at the point where I can produce reliably paddle tails, crankbaits, flukes, kind of whatever I want. And now the next step is really how to turn my single cavity prototype molds into multi-cavity I'll call them production molds, even though like I don't make lures for a living, I make them for myself. But, I don't want to get into a situation where I'm got to spend all day making baits for one trip, right? I want to turn them into multi-cavity molds. I can go in there in an hour, I have all the baits I need and all the colors I need for the next month. So that's my next goal. So what's happening in 2022? Well, more lures, more molds. Got a great Patreon community. I've met some awesome people over there from around the world. Got a guy in there from Tasmania, guy in there from Poland, even a guy in there from Fort Worth, of all places. It's pretty sweet. If you guys are interested in joining and getting all of my secrets and access to me directly, I often jump on Zoom calls with patrons and help them get over little hurdles they have in their lure design processes. And it's just an awesome place to hang out. And you get access to all of my Fusion 360 projects for the lures, the STL files if you want to print them. And if you want to open up a lure business, you can use them for that, right? You can just print them out yourself, the molds or whatever, and go crazy, man. So up next, I'm really condensing down everything I learned the past year and putting it into a series of videos. And when those get started, they'll be right here. Take care, tight lines.